The story of my shattered world begins in a place that once felt like a paradise. I'm Jake, a 45-year-old logistics manager living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. My wife, Linda, and I have been married for 20 years. We have two children, Sarah, who is 16, and Lizzie, who is 14. Our home is a modest but comfortable two-story house with a well-tended garden, where Linda spends much of her time. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, where barbecues are a regular summer event, and where kids ride their bikes up and down the street without a care in the world. Our life seemed perfect. Linda was a stay-at-home mom who devoted her time to our daughters and our home, while I worked long hours to provide for our family. We had our routines, family dinners, weekend outings, and annual vacations to the beach. We were the picture of a happy family, or so I thought. Our neighborhood was the epitome of tranquility. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs, and kids playing basketball in driveways. The community was tight-knit, and we all looked out for one another. It was the kind of place where you felt safe, where you believed in the strength of your family and the stability of your marriage. Little did I know, beneath the surface of our idyllic life, there were cracks forming, threatening to shatter everything I held dear. It started with small things. Linda became more distant, her smiles less frequent. She was always on her phone, texting or browsing social media, but when I asked, she brushed it off as talking to friends or looking at recipes. Our conversations grew shorter, more superficial. Gone were the days when we'd sit on the porch with a glass of wine, talking about our dreams and the future. Instead, there was an invisible wall between us, a barrier I couldn't break through. Her behavior grew more peculiar as the weeks went by. She started going out more often, claiming she needed time to herself or was meeting friends. These outings were usually on weekends or late afternoons, times when she'd typically be home with the girls and me. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, everyone needs a break from routine, right? But then there were the calls she'd step outside to take, speaking in hushed tones, her back turned to me. When I asked who it was, she'd say it was her sister or an old friend from high school. I wanted to believe her, but the nagging doubt in my mind kept growing. There was a tension in the air, something unspoken that neither of us dared to address. Our intimacy suffered too. Linda's excuses ranged from being too tired to having a headache. She rarely initiated any affection, and when I tried, she seemed disinterested, almost repulsed. Our bedroom, once a sanctuary of our love, had become a cold, desolate place. One evening, as I was helping Sarah with her homework in the kitchen, Linda walked in, dressed to the nines. She wore a tight red dress I hadn't seen before, her makeup meticulously done. "Going somewhere?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just out with a friend," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "Which friend?" I pressed, not wanting to sound paranoid but needing to know. "Just a friend from the gym," she said dismissively, grabbing her keys and heading for the door. Sarah looked up at me, her young eyes filled with confusion. "Dad, why is Mom always going out?" I forced a smile, patting her shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetheart. She's just busy." Busy with what, though? That was the question gnawing at my insides. I decided to pay closer attention. I noticed Linda's phone was always on silent, and she guarded it fiercely, even taking it to the bathroom with her. One night, curiosity got the better of me. While she was asleep, I reached for her phone, hoping to find answers. But it was locked with a password I didn't know. I put it back, my heart heavy with suspicion. The turning point came when I found a receipt in the trash for a hotel downtown, dated on a day she was supposedly at a friend's house. My mind raced with possibilities, each more painful than the last. Could she be meeting someone? Was she having an affair? I started to piece together other oddities, unexplained absences, changes in her appearance, the way she'd quickly shut her laptop when I entered the room. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. The Linda I knew, the woman I loved, seemed to be slipping away, replaced by someone secretive and distant. I felt like a stranger in my own home, my life unraveling before my eyes. The doubts festered, and the once solid foundation of our marriage began to crack. I needed to know the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. And so, I resolved to find out, to uncover the secrets Linda was hiding, even if it meant shattering the illusion of our perfect life forever. The day I discovered the truth about Linda's betrayal started out like any other. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and the girls were at a friend's house for a sleepover. Linda had said she was going to the gym, but something about her demeanor seemed off. She was too eager to leave, her eyes avoiding mine as she kissed me on the cheek and hurried out the door. With the house empty, I decided to do some cleaning to keep my mind occupied. As I vacuumed the living room, I noticed Linda's laptop on the coffee table. It was closed but not off, the faint hum of the hard drive indicating it was in sleep mode. I hesitated for a moment, a war raging inside me between respect for her privacy and the need to know the truth. My need for answers won out. I opened the laptop and was greeted by her desktop, cluttered with icons and open tabs. My heart raced as I navigated to her email. The moment of truth was at hand. Scrolling through her inbox, I saw nothing unusual at first. Just the usual barrage of newsletters and promotional emails. But then I noticed a series of messages from someone named Chris. The name was familiar, but not in a good way. He was an old high school friend of Linda's, someone who'd always seemed a bit too friendly. I clicked on the latest email, dated from the night before. The contents made my blood run cold. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. When can we meet again? Love, Chris. My hands shook as I read the words over and over. There was no mistaking the intimate tone, the familiarity. This wasn't just an old friend. This was something more. I clicked through the chain of emails, each one more damning than the last. They had been meeting regularly for months, their messages filled with declarations of love and plans for future encounters. The explicit photos and messages left no room for doubt. Linda was having an affair. The ground felt like it was shifting beneath me. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. I had to get out. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, needing to clear my head. As I drove aimlessly through our neighborhood, memories of Linda and me flooded my mind. Our wedding day, the births of our daughters, family vacations. It all felt like a cruel joke now, a facade hiding the truth of her betrayal. After what felt like hours, I found myself parked outside the hotel from the receipt I had found. I don't know what I was hoping to find, maybe a way to confront this head on. As I sat there, lost in thought, I saw them. Linda and Chris, walking out of the hotel, laughing and holding hands. The sight was a dagger to my heart. I felt a mix of rage, sorrow, and utter disbelief. I watched them for a moment, my mind reeling. Then, in a moment of clarity, I took out my phone and snapped a few photos. This wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. I needed evidence, not just for me, but for whatever lay ahead in the impending storm of our crumbling marriage. I drove back home, my emotions a tempest inside me. When I got there, Linda was already back, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. The sight of her, so calm and collected, made my blood boil. "Jake, is everything okay?" she asked, feigning concern. I couldn't hold back any longer. "No, Linda, everything is not okay. I know about you and Chris." Her face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me," I snapped, throwing my phone on the table, the photos of her and Chris displayed on the screen. "I saw you. I read your emails. How long has this been going on?" She stammered, trying to find the right words. "Jake, I can explain." "Explain? There's nothing to explain," I shouted, the anger I had been holding in finally erupting. "You've been lying to me, to our family. Do you even understand what you've done?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I had seen enough. "I'm filing for divorce, Linda. I can't do this anymore." Her sobs filled the room as I walked out, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My life had been turned upside down, and now all I could do was move forward, away from the wreckage of our marriage. The days following the discovery were a blur. I felt like a ghost, drifting through the remnants of my life. Linda tried to talk to me, but I shut her out. I couldn't bear to hear her excuses or explanations. I stayed in the guest room, avoiding her as much as possible. Our home, once a sanctuary, had become a battlefield. One evening, after putting the girls to bed, Linda cornered me in the kitchen. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, but I couldn't find it in myself to feel sympathy. "Jake, please, we need to talk," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied coldly, trying to keep my composure. "Please," she insisted, stepping closer. "Just hear me out." I reluctantly sat down at the kitchen table, crossing my arms defensively. "Fine. Talk." She took a deep breath, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I never meant for any of this to happen. It started out as just a friendship, but things got out of hand. Out of hand? I scoffed, my anger rising. Linda, you had an affair. You betrayed me and our family. That's more than just out of hand. She sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I was lonely, Jake. You were always working, always busy. I needed someone to talk to, someone who made me feel wanted. So it's my fault? I snapped, standing up. I worked to provide for this family. Everything I did was for you and the girls. And this is how you repay me? No, that's not what I meant, she cried, reaching for me. I'm not blaming you. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I love you, Jake. I don't want to lose you. Love? I laughed bitterly, pulling away from her. You don't destroy the person you love. You don't lie and cheat. That's not love, Linda. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, Jake. Please give me another chance. I'll do anything to make this right. I stared down at her, my heart aching. This was the woman I had vowed to spend my life with, the mother of my children. But she had shattered my trust, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. I don't know if I can, I said quietly, my voice trembling. You've hurt me more than I can put into words. I need time to think. She nodded, her tears soaking the floor. Take all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I'm sorry, to show you that I still love you. I left her there, her sobs echoing through the house as I retreated to the guest room. Sleep was elusive that night, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Could I ever forgive her? Could we ever rebuild what had been destroyed? The next day, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face my colleagues, couldn't pretend that everything was normal. I spent the day driving aimlessly, trying to clear my head. I found myself at a park we used to visit when the girls were younger. Sitting on a bench, I watched children play, their laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I was lost in thought when my phone rang. It was Linda. Jake, please come home. We need to talk, she said, her voice shaky. I'll be home soon, I replied, ending the call. When I arrived, Linda was waiting for me in the living room. She had cleaned up, her eyes less swollen but still red from crying. Jake, I want to come clean about everything, she began, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. Chris and I, it started a year ago. We met at a school reunion, and we just clicked. At first, it was just texts, then calls, and then you started sleeping with him, I finished for her, my voice cold. She nodded, tears streaming down her face again. Yes, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Linda, I don't know if I can ever forgive you. What you did, it's changed everything. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. But please, let's try to work through this. For the girls. For us. I looked at her, my heart heavy with pain and anger. I'll think about it. But right now, I need space. I need time to process all of this. She nodded, her eyes filled with desperation and sorrow. Take all the time you need. I'll be here waiting, hoping that we can find a way to heal. As I walked away, I felt a glimmer of something. Hope, maybe. That we could find a way through this darkness. But for now, the path ahead was uncertain, and my heart was still too broken to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house remained thick enough to cut with a knife. Linda continued to try and make amends, but her efforts only deepened my resentment. I couldn't shake the image of her with Chris, the lies she had told, the betrayal I felt. I needed an outlet for my anger, a way to regain some control over my shattered life. One evening, after another pointless argument with Linda, I decided enough was enough. I was going to take matters into my own hands. If she thought she could betray me and get away with it, she had another thing coming. I spent the next few nights planning my revenge, meticulous in every detail. First, I reached out to Chris' wife, a woman named Amy. I had met her a few times at social gatherings and knew she was a kind and decent person. She deserved to know the truth, just as I had discovered it. I found her number in an old directory and called her, my heart pounding. Hello, she answered, her voice hesitant. Amy, it's Jake. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Jake? What's going on? She asked, confusion evident. It's about Chris and Linda, I began, taking a deep breath. They're having an affair. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What? She finally whispered, her voice trembling. I have proof, I continued. Emails, pictures, messages. I can send them to you. She didn't respond for a moment, then finally said, Okay, send them to me. I sent her the damning evidence, my hands shaking as I attached the files. When I hit send, a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. At least now, Chris would face the consequences of his actions. Next, I decided to expose Linda's affair publicly. I created a fake email account and sent the evidence to her closest friends and family. I wanted everyone to know the truth, to see the woman behind the facade. It was petty, yes, but in my heart, I needed some form of justice. The fallout was immediate. Linda's phone started buzzing incessantly as messages of shock and disgust poured in. She looked at me with wide, horrified eyes, her face pale. Jake, what did you do? She whispered, her voice shaking. I did what needed to be done, I replied coldly. People deserve to know the truth. She burst into tears, collapsing onto the couch. How could you do this to me? To us? How could you do this to me? I shot back, my anger boiling over. You brought this on yourself, Linda! The next few days were a whirlwind of chaos. Linda's reputation was in tatters, her friends turning their backs on her. She spent most of her time in our bedroom, crying and begging for forgiveness. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction watching her suffer, knowing she was experiencing just a fraction of the pain she had caused me. But my revenge didn't stop there. I hired a private investigator to dig into Chris' life. I wanted to know everything about him, every secret he was hiding. The investigator was thorough, uncovering a web of lies and deceit that painted Chris as a serial cheater and manipulator. Armed with this information, I decided to destroy him professionally. Chris worked for a prestigious company, one that prided itself on integrity and moral values. I sent an anonymous package to his boss, containing the evidence of his affair with Linda and the investigator's report. Within a week, Chris was fired, his career in ruins. The news spread quickly, and he became a pariah in his social circle. Watching Chris' life crumble gave me a perverse sense of closure. He had taken so much from me, and now I had taken something from him. But despite the satisfaction I felt, the emptiness inside me remained. Revenge hadn't healed the wounds. It had only deepened them. Linda's breakdown reached a tipping point. One night, she came to me, her eyes hollow, her voice barely a whisper. Jake, I can't do this anymore. I need help. Seeing her so broken, so desperate, tugged at something inside me. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, a part of me still cared for her. I agreed to help her find a therapist, hoping that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward. As Linda began therapy, I focused on rebuilding my life. I spent more time with Sarah and Lizzie, trying to be the best father I could be despite the turmoil at home. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind occupied. But the nights were the hardest. Alone in the guest room, the silence was deafening. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I knew I had to find a way to heal, to let go of the anger and pain that consumed me. Revenge had given me a fleeting sense of power, but it hadn't brought the closure I had hoped for. It was a temporary fix, a band-aid on a wound that needed time and care to truly heal. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized that the only way to move forward was to confront my feelings head-on, to face the pain and work through it, no matter how hard it might be. Weeks turned into months, and the aftermath of Linda's betrayal slowly settled into a painful but manageable routine. She continued therapy, and while her efforts to mend our relationship were earnest, I remained guarded. The damage was too deep, the scars too fresh. Our interactions were polite, but distant, like two strangers cohabiting a space filled with memories of a life that once was. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Linda approached me in the living room. She looked fragile, almost translucent under the dim light. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was a determination in her gaze that hadn't been there before. Jake, can we talk? She asked softly, her voice trembling. I nodded, setting aside the book I had been pretending to read. Sure. She sat down on the couch opposite me, taking a deep breath before speaking. I've been doing a lot of thinking in therapy, a lot of reflecting, and I've come to realize just how much I've hurt you, how much I've damaged our family. I stayed silent, letting her continue. I know saying I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. But I am. I'm so sorry, Jake, for everything. Sorry isn't enough, Linda, I replied quietly. You destroyed my trust. You shattered our marriage. I know, she whispered, wiping her tears. But I want you to know that I've decided to move out. I think it's for the best. For you. For me. For the girls. We can't keep living like this, in this constant state of pain and resentment. Her words took me by surprise. I had expected her to continue fighting for our marriage, to keep trying to make amends. But as much as her decision hurt, I knew she was right. We couldn't keep going on like this. Where will you go? I asked, my voice hollow. I found an apartment not far from here, she said. I'll be close enough to see the girls regularly. I want to be a part of their lives, even if we can't be together. I nodded, the reality of our situation sinking in. I think it's the right decision. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. Finally, Linda broke the silence. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, Jake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Even when I was with him, a part of me always loved you. I lost my way. I loved you too, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. But love isn't enough anymore. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and goodbyes. Sarah and Lizzie were confused and upset, but we tried to explain as best we could. We assured them that we both loved them and that this was the best way to ensure their happiness. The morning Linda moved out was a somber one. We stood in the driveway, watching as the movers loaded the last of her things into the truck. She hugged the girls tightly, promising to see them soon. Then she turned to me. Take care of yourself, Jake, she said, her voice filled with sadness and regret. You too, I replied, unable to find any other words. As she drove away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The chapter of our life together was officially over, but the wounds were still fresh and the path ahead uncertain. That evening, after the girls were asleep, I sat on the porch with a beer, staring at the stars. The silence was both comforting and oppressive. I thought about all that had happened, all that had been lost. But amidst the pain, there was a flicker of hope. Hope that this new chapter, however painful, would eventually lead to healing. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose. It was time to move forward, to rebuild my life. I focused on being the best father I could be, on finding joy in the small moments with Sarah and Lizzie. Slowly but surely, we began to find our new normal. Linda and I kept our interactions civil for the sake of the girls. We established a co-parenting routine, and while it wasn't easy, it was necessary. Over time, the raw edges of our relationship began to smooth out, replaced by a cautious respect. One evening, months after she had moved out, Linda and I met to discuss some logistics for the girls. As we sat at a small cafe sipping our coffee, she looked at me with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. Jake, I just want to thank you, she said, for giving me the chance to be a part of the girls' lives, for not shutting me out completely. I know I don't deserve it. It's not about what you deserve, I replied, my voice steady. It's about what the girls need. They need both of us. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm trying to be better, for them and for myself. I know, I said. And I'm trying to move forward too. As we parted ways that evening, I felt a sense of closure. The wounds were still there, but they were beginning to heal. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about her. It was about me too. It was about letting go of the anger and pain, about finding peace within myself. Linda and I would never be what we once were, but we had found a way to coexist, to focus on the future instead of being haunted by the past, and in that, there was a small measure of redemption. The months following Linda's departure were marked by a tumultuous mix of healing and legal battles. Despite our attempts to keep things amicable for the sake of Sarah and Lizzie, the divorce proceedings were anything but smooth. Linda's initial cooperation gave way to demands and disputes over finances, custody, and property. I knew this was coming. Our marriage had been a battlefield, and now the divorce was turning into one as well. I hired a top-notch divorce lawyer, Mr. Davis, who had already helped me gather evidence against Linda. We prepared meticulously for the court proceedings, knowing that every detail could make a difference. The trial began on a gray morning in late autumn. The courtroom was intimidating, its sterile walls and cold benches a stark contrast to the warmth of the life I once knew. Linda and I sat on opposite sides, our lawyers between us. She looked tired, the weight of the past year etched into her face. I wondered if I looked the same. The judge entered and the trial commenced. Linda's lawyer started by painting her as a devoted mother who had made a mistake but was trying to make amends. They argued for joint custody, citing her efforts to rebuild her life and maintain a close relationship with the girls. Mr. Davis countered with the evidence we had collected. The emails, photos, and the private investigator's report detailing Linda's affair. He argued that her actions had destabilized our family and that full custody should be awarded to me to ensure a stable environment for Sarah and Lizzie. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the judge was sympathetic to our situation. He saw through the facade Linda's lawyer tried to present. When Linda took the stand, her tears and apologies seemed hollow, rehearsed. I knew she loved our daughters, but her betrayal had shown a profound disregard for the family we had built. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke from the heart. I described the impact of Linda's affair on our family, the pain it had caused, and my determination to provide a stable, loving home for our daughters. I emphasized my willingness to co-parent and ensure the girls had a relationship with their mother, despite everything that had happened. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. When the trial concluded, he took a moment to review his notes before delivering his verdict. The courtroom was silent, the tension palpable. In light of the evidence presented and considering the best interests of the children, the judge began, his voice steady. I am awarding primary custody to Mr. Jake Anderson. Mrs. Linda Anderson will have visitation rights, with specific terms to be agreed upon by both parties. A wave of relief washed over me, mixed with a deep sadness. This wasn't a victory to celebrate, but a necessary step towards stability for Sarah and Lizzie. Linda looked devastated, her eyes filled with tears as she nodded at the judge's decision. After the trial, Linda and I met one last time to discuss the details of the custody arrangement. We sat in a small conference room, accompanied by our lawyers. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also a sense of resignation. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I want the girls to be happy, Jake, Linda said, her voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. So will I replied, my tone firm, but not unkind. They need us both, even if we can't be together. We agreed on a schedule that allowed Linda to see Sarah and Lizzie regularly, ensuring they had time with both parents. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could do under the circumstances. As we left the conference room, I felt a strange sense of peace. The legal battles were over, and now it was time to focus on healing, on building a new life for myself and my daughters. Linda and I would always be connected through Sarah and Lizzie, but the wounds of the past would take time to heal. In the months that followed, our new routine slowly began to take shape. The girls adapted to the changes, their resilience and strength inspiring me every day. Linda kept her promise, making the most of her visitation time and working hard to rebuild her relationship with the girls. One evening, as I watched Sarah and Lizzie play in the yard, I realized that despite everything, we were going to be okay. The scars of the past would always be there, but they didn't have to define our future. We had found a way to move forward, to create a new normal. The trial had been a painful but necessary part of our journey. It had forced us to confront the reality of our situation and make difficult decisions for the sake of our children. And in the end, it had given us the opportunity to start anew, to rebuild our lives on a foundation of honesty and resilience. The months after the trial were a time of reflection and rebuilding. The wounds from Linda's betrayal and the subsequent divorce were still fresh, but there was a growing sense of hope and possibility. I focused on creating a stable and nurturing environment for Sarah and Lizzie, ensuring they felt loved and supported every step of the way. Our new routine settled into a comforting rhythm. Mornings were filled with the hustle of getting the girls ready for school, packing lunches, and sharing quick breakfasts together. Evenings were dedicated to homework, dinners, and winding down with a family movie or a board game. Weekends became our time for adventures, exploring parks, going on hikes, and rediscovering the simple joys of life. Linda kept her word about her visitation rights, and while our interactions remained civil, they were also distant. We communicated through text or email, focusing solely on the logistics of co-parenting. The girls seemed to adjust well, enjoying their time with both parents and finding comfort in the consistency we provided. One day, while sorting through some old boxes in the attic, I came across a photo album from the early years of our marriage. Flipping through the pages, I saw the smiles, the laughter, the love that had once been so strong. It was bittersweet, a reminder of what had been lost, but also a testament to the good times we had shared. As I looked at the photos, I realized that holding on to anger and resentment would only hinder my healing process. I needed to forgive, not for Linda's sake, but for mine. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what she had done. It meant letting go of the pain and allowing myself to move forward. I reached out to a therapist to help me navigate these complex emotions. Dr. Bennett was a calm and empathetic presence, guiding me through the process of healing and self-discovery. In our sessions, I confronted my pain, my anger, and my fears. I learned to accept what had happened and to focus on the future. As the seasons changed, so did I. The raw pain of betrayal slowly transformed into a deeper understanding of myself and what I wanted from life. I realized that I deserved happiness and that I had the power to create it. One evening, after tucking the girls into bed, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, reflecting on the journey so far. The night was peaceful, the stars twinkling above, and I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in a long time. My phone buzzed with a message from Linda, asking about the girls' schedule for the weekend. I replied, keeping the conversation brief and to the point. As I set my phone down, I thought about the future. It was time to start thinking about what lay ahead, to open myself up to new possibilities. I had spent so much time focused on the past and the pain that it was easy to forget there was a world of opportunity waiting for me. I decided to start small. I reconnected with old friends, went out more, and even joined a local community group that organized charity events and social gatherings. It felt good to be part of something bigger, to contribute and connect with others. One afternoon, at a community event, I met Emma. She was kind, intelligent, and had a warm smile that immediately put me at ease. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other at various events, our friendship slowly blossoming into something more. Emma was different from Linda in many ways. She was open, honest, and had a calming presence that balanced my own intensity. We took things slow, both of us cautious but hopeful. As our relationship grew, I introduced her to Sarah and Lizzie. They took to her immediately, her warmth and kindness winning them over. With Emma, I found a renewed sense of hope and happiness. She understood my past and accepted it, but she also encouraged me to look forward, to embrace the possibilities of the future. We spent our weekends exploring new places, sharing stories, and building a relationship based on trust and mutual respect. The first holiday season post-divorce was challenging, but also healing. Linda and I managed to coordinate the girls' schedules to ensure they enjoyed time with both of us. On Christmas Eve, Emma joined us for a quiet dinner at home. As we exchanged gifts and shared laughter, I felt a sense of completeness I hadn't felt in years. Sarah and Lizzie thrived in the new environment, their resilience and adaptability shining through. They maintained a strong bond with both me and Linda, and I was grateful for the support system we had managed to create for them. They were my priority, and seeing them happy and well-adjusted was the greatest reward. Life had a way of coming full circle. The pain and betrayal that had once threatened to destroy me had also paved the way for growth and new beginnings. I had learned to navigate the complexities of my emotions, to forgive, and to open my heart again. Emma was a part of that journey, a reminder that love and happiness were still possible. As I stood on the porch one evening, looking out at the twinkling lights of our neighborhood, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for my daughters, for the lessons learned, and for the new life I was building. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The journey of healing and self-discovery was far from over, but I had found my footing. With Sarah, Lizzie, and Emma by my side, I was ready to move forward, to create a life filled with love, joy, and new adventures. The past was a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was free to write the next chapter of my story, one day at a time.